Hey guys, Shawna here. Okay, so I'm here to talk about the treatless clicks, and I'm going to talk to everybody in one big thing. Okay, first of all, I personally don't like the term treatless clicks. There's a lot of confusion in the industry. There's some people that consider a treat food. So that is kind of what we're referring to when we talk about treatless clicks with the connection training. But there's a lot of people in the industry that consider a treat any well-conditioned behavior. And frankly, in my book, I I use reinforcers, meaning food, because my book was written so long ago. Nobody was ready for the term secondary reinforcers. So, first of all, I don't prefer the term treatless clicks. I think really what we're doing is it's foodless clicks, is what we're talking about. It's using secondary reinforcers with a bridge signal as opposed to a prime food being, because there's other primary reinforcers, but as opposed to using food, which is where we kind of tend to start with. So first things first, I think that's really good. Okay, Susie and Megan, you both brought up about using a carry-on signal. I've always preferred to use a bridge signal as a terminal bridge. So that is, to me, brings the most clarity, but I'm not opposed to people doing other things as well. But sometimes I feel like it gets muddy, and I find that if we and there's also, we can really die on the semantics of a discussion. People can go, but is that a treatless click? Is that a this? Is it a this? And we can go round and round. Ultimately, I say do what works for you and your horse, and feel free to experiment. As much as we have principles or papers or things that people have done that worked with lab rats or worked with their animals, we are working with animals that they're so diverse and have so many backgrounds that it's really hard to know exactly. I mean, it's not the same. There's just too many factors kind of weigh in. But for me personally, I prefer to do where the bridge signal is a terminal bridge signal. And if I want them to carry on, I give them another cue. So if I want, but I tend to use less clicks than more clicks that aren't backed up. More of my clicks are backed up, I think, than people may suspect. So when I'm building duration, I don't tend to use more bridges. I don't. I go slower and make sure it's clear, and I build up the increments bit by bit by bit. So when I'm teaching a new behavior, when I'm working on duration, when I'm working on a criteria that is changing and potential for frustration, I want to have a very high rate of reinforcement coming in so that they learn to love that behavior. When I start to use more of the treatless clicks to build maybe higher criteria, a little bit more duration on something that's really stronger, it's not the early initial duration, it's the longer period, I would be sure that this behavior, whatever it is I'm working on, is very, very, very strong in its reinforcement history, to the point where they're offering it and really want to do it. So that I'm sure that it is something they quite like, because the next behavior I ask for, whether it's a repeat or continuation of this behavior, whatever cue I'm going to give them after my bridge signal, I want it to be a strong one, a good one that I feel confident is in fact a conditioned reinforcer and not linked with frustration or anything along those lines. So I don't use a bridge signal, the bridge signal that I use. I don't use it in a way that says, that was good, keep going. I might say, that was good, go back to your target, as soon as I clicked. So if I clicked, I would remind them to go back to their target as long as it was well conditioned. So I hope that kind of clears it up. I mean, and I understand, and I think that there's a point where we want to kind of desensitize the clicker for horses who maybe haven't had the right start emotionally, and they now think the clicker causes tension and it's too much, and they get entitled, and we've made it all about the food. And I think in that case, sometimes we have to unpack that a little bit and soften it and put some desensitizing in there to make it not quite that tense place that it is. But if I have a clean start with a horse, I don't usually encounter that kind of thing. So all my clicks can be quite heavily reinforced, but I've managed those emotions throughout. So ideally, if we have a good start, I'm going to use less clicks, more food reward for each click. My friend Dr. Sue McDonald, who is quite respected over here as a as an equine behaviorist, she's used positive reinforcement for a number of years, and I've known her for years. She's had me come and do seminars and stuff together. We would be speakers and demonstrators on things. And one of the things she told me, she said she found if she fed 1 in 10 clicks that she maintained behavior. Well, that just made me cringe because I'm just not used to that. I'm a heavy-handed feeder. So I was like, oh, but I couldn't do 10 without feeding it there. That to me doesn't sit well, but it worked for her and it worked for her horses because she introduced it, after we got to know each other, to her feral herd. And so they would want to be as hands-off as possible to be able to but still be able to get good blood work that wasn't stress-induced, and so they could get accurate readings on stuff. So the bridge signal is, when it is well conditioned, it is a conditioned reinforcer that holds a very high value and can maintain behavior on its own as long as it has a certain maintenance schedule behind it. But I find that I do less clicks, more food per click, and so with building duration, I don't tend to use errant clicks. My clicks are more often than not built up with the food behind it, and the duration is built individually, just going a little bit slower until they get the process. I'm a little more black and white in some ways about it, but again, it goes all the way back to my history with the marine mammals. You did not, at any cost, everything we did was to minimize frustration, because frustration may lead to aggression. So everything had to be happy, good emotions and happy, good feeling to it. So we didn't really use, my bridge signal has always been used as a terminal bridge signal. I will use words a lot of times that are not conditioned in the classic conditioning way. I didn't go, this feed, this feed, this feed, this feed, but they've been part of a process, like where I'll say, that's it, good boy, keep going, and I'll be talking to them, and I think from my tone, they quite quickly learn that I'm on the right track. She's happy, she's pleased, but I haven't set out to train it as a signal. So I just haven't had a need or a want to use a keep going signal. Again, I think it can muddy the waters. The muddier it gets, the less clear it is. And I find the less clarity we have, oftentimes more frustration can kind of seep into the process. And I really want to minimize that. So that's my take on it. So that's the treatless click dilemma. So hopefully I covered people's questions and thoughts about it, but I do think it is something that's been a hot topic for a number of years. And with the marine mammals, we always used secondary reinforcers. I mean, it's just something we did. It's, you'd have 150 behaviors in a show. We didn't not tell them when they did it right, because that oftentimes would make things kind of clear and frustrating for them. So we said, yes, that was great. Come back to me and we're going to do whatever. Or here's another cue, carry on, and we're going to do whatever. So we had, up to, in a sea lion show, we had up to 150 behaviors in the show. Now, we're not going to feed 150 times, or we'd have them sleeping by the end of the show with their big fat bellies. But what we wanted to communicate, that was great, that was great, that was great, that was great. Because when things weren't great is when we gave them, we usually use the LRS, we just pause for a minute and say, I saw what you did there, I'm not going to reinforce you, let's move on. And so we tended to, as much as we could, bridge the things that were good, but follow it up with secondary reinforcers. So we communicated pretty clearly what we wanted. There's times when we sent multiple horses, multiple animals out on a behavior, and we might not be able to bridge because somebody in there was doing it sub criteria. But when they came back, the ones that were good got a pretty good, clear, positive reinforcement out of it. So there's times when we couldn't bridge because of that, but whenever we could bridge, we did bridge to keep that communication clear, what we liked and what our criteria was, and to let them know clearly that they did a good job and didn't second guess their performance. So I hope that helps. I love the questions and I love the discussion, and I think it's a really important one to have, because it's the marine mammal trainers who really took it out of the books and put it into practical application. And in the marine mammal industry, we never said you had to feed every click. And well, we didn't use clickers. We used whistles or other bridge signals too. So that was a concept that's very directly come from the dog training world. And so when I first started training horses, and I had people come up to me and go, you didn't feed that. You can't do that. I'd be like, I didn't understand. But it kind of went back to that dog training world, not the marine mammal world. It was such a norm that we didn't really even discuss it because it was what we did, Anyway, there you go. That makes a long answer even longer. So I hope that clears things up for you. If you have more questions, please don't hesitate to ask, because I sure do like answer them and having discussion and knowing that you're thinking about some of the kind of challenging concepts or things that may help in your growing. All right, bye.